Okay, so it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is Godinez. I will never forget when I first met him, because he also speaks Spanish, like me. And he's a filmmaker, a photographer, a veteran, now also a yoga teacher, a lovely father. There's his kid. And yeah, he's been helping so much during all the time in the program, because a part of being in addition of being a student, he's also a graduate assistant. So he's the one who records the classes, who we can see them from home because of his help, who sets up the place, and he's doing a wonderful job by bringing yoga to communities in Los Angeles. So I leave you with his talk.
Okay, so if you take a look at this map, I was hoping that it would be a little bit more interactive, but if you Google yoga studios in Los Angeles, you would see a lot of yoga studios on the west side, maybe Pasadena, and there's abundance of yoga and mindfulness spaces throughout Los Angeles. You have many styles to address various needs. You have ashrams with various lineages. You have meditation centers, and you even have goat yoga. When I started yoga studies at LMU, I already had a goal. I gave Sarah an email. She gave me a call, and she asked me, why would you want to attend LMU? And I said that I want to bring yoga in the Northeast San Fernando Valley. So that's what I'm doing. So my thesis explores some of the social, economic, religious factors why yoga does not exist in these neighborhoods, not including Northeast San Fernando Valley. We've explored different parts of Los Angeles where some of these places exist without yoga studios. But our main impetus was to explore how we can try to start these practices in our own communities. So I started by looking at a survey that was conducted in a government housing in Maryland, and they had a few people where they asked them questions about what they know about yoga, and if there's any kind of fears that they have about yoga, what might be causes for them not to practice yoga, and how would they practice more often if that were the case. And taking this survey, I conducted a series of questions, and I started approaching different spaces in other parts of Los Angeles, including People's Yoga. So People's Yoga is in East LA. It's predominantly Latinos. It's about 90% Latinos. And the story behind it is two friends, Lauren and Leah, and they were asking very similar questions that I was. Why does yoga not exist in this part of Los Angeles? And what could we do to make sure that we could be the first? So they started off with a pop-up program, and it quickly gained steam. And they did an Indiegogo fundraiser, and in 2 months they managed to open a space up. The need was there, and they met it. So they are planting seeds and planting new roots of yoga in East LA. Another place is Green Tree Yoga, and this is a nonprofit organization. They teach classes 7 days a week, and all classes are donation based. And this was really inspirational. We actually, my wife and I, we took a class over there, a mommy and me class, and except Daddy was there too as well. What we found out about this place is that they have an excellent teacher training program, and they have a social justice and environmental justice component in their teacher program. Again, this is another example where they're trying to meet the needs of these particular communities. So this is an idea of where I live, northeast San Fernando Valley, which consists of Pacoima, Lake Terrace, Silmar, and San Fernando. And I'm 39 years old, and when I started this program, there had never been a yoga space here. So I wanted to help out in that process. And so we started off with asking some of our classmates to be ready in case any kind of opportunities exist. We started talking to friends who were members of nonprofit organizations. And one thing we found out was that these communities, they have a lot of mom and pop shops, and they have a lot of nonprofit organizations. These nonprofit organizations try to address some of the needs that, some of the disparities that are found in these neighborhoods, from health disparities to ecological issues that are happening there, from the pollutants and just some of the violence that has existed throughout the years. So now, these are locations where we have had yoga classes. 10 more minutes, or okay. Okay, so at the beginning of our 2-year experience here at Yoga Studies, there was no yoga, as far as we know, regularly. There have been sporadic attempts to get yoga happening, but now these are some of the locations where my wife and I are teaching now. So after doing a little bit of the research and finding inspiration from some of these other locations, we wanted to find a way to attempt to bring yoga in a practical way and consider what can we do to make it economically sustainable for ourselves if that's what we want to do. And so we were approached by a nonprofit organization called Pacoima Beautiful, and they're located at the City Hall, and they have a monthly market where people come in and they drop off their fruits, their vegetables, and anybody can come by and they mix them up and they hand them out. And they have different workshops from how to work with your finances to how to try a vegan diet. They've had salads there, and they have various workshops from members of various universities who come in, and they're part of different programs, and they try to apply what they're learning at their universities, and they're representing their universities there. So Loyola Marymount Yoga Study students started representing our program there. We had a few members, including Elba and Eduardo, who you see there. And we tried to meet the needs depending on the demographics. So we noticed right away that the majority of the students were middle-aged women to elder women, and they all speak Spanish. So we started teaching regular Hatha yoga classes, but then we started doing more yin classes. Most of the classes were in Spanish. And then, once I got my 200-hour teacher training during this program and went to India, I was ready to teach. I wanted to jump. I wanted to take a leap. My wife, soon after, she took her 200-hour course here at Loyola Marymount with Yoga and Healing Science. So we needed to create a brand for ourselves. So we created a pop-up program. And early on into our stay here, I asked some of the other members together, and we had a photo shoot, and we had everybody do a bunch of different asanas, and we wanted to use this as a photo archive in case somebody wanted to use their photography for their papers. So I decided to use it for our advertisements. So this area, they may not have many websites, but they use a lot of Instagram to promote their business, to promote events, so we decided to take a similar approach. So as you see here, we were heavily dependent on social media. So we started introducing concepts, yogic concepts like different types of asanas, mudras, pranayama practices, very basic, very introductory, to try to get the word out about how beneficial yoga could be. And so soon after, the members of Pacoima Beautiful, they asked us if we could teach classes at an art incubator where 6 local artists eventually housed this unit, and they're giving classes to young artists. They're acting as mentors, and they're walking them through commissioned artwork around Van Nuys Boulevard and Pacoima. Very inspirational. So we tried to create classes that would be helpful for artists. So we are teaching Hatha Yoga classes with about 10-minute meditations in each class, trying to meet the needs of the locals there. So I'm also a member of the veteran community. I'm a member of Veterans of Foreign Wars in San Fernando. And as the junior vice president, I caught the attention of the mayor of San Fernando at the time. I let him know what we're trying to do. And I convinced some of the members to allow us to use the space to offer classes not only to the locals there, but to try to bring veterans who may be going through PTSD to go and use a space like this, a nonprofit organization that is not really being used, but to use it in a meaningful way. And that is something that we're still working on. And then we tried yoga at the park. I just want to add that. We had one class so far. We may try it again down the line. And then, so some of the members who started attending these classes, they actually were leaders of their own communities trying to find out what's going on. Yoga's happening for the very first time. So we actually met the creative director of Dia Chuchas. It's a bookstore. It's also a nonprofit organization. And they asked us to come by and possibly teach classes at their space. They have bilingual books. They have books written by and are for people of color, as well as everybody else. And we teach Tuesday night in, and we teach Sunday Hatha Flow there. They also have like a young mentorship program called the Young Warriors Program. And we're speaking with the head of that program, and we're going to start introducing yoga concepts. We're going to have a workshop, 10-week program there. In my thesis, we have a curriculum there that we're working on. And we've gone to a few of their events, and we've been meeting other people who are asking us what we want to do. So, what would we like to do? As a pop-up, well, we've been exploring different ways where we can introduce yoga, and in many ways we had to just put our heads down and just move forward and teach whenever and however we can, and establish relationships with some of the locals in the community, from the aspiring politicians to the mayor of San Fernando to business leaders to people who are trying out yoga for the very first time. It's been a wonderful discovery. It's been difficult at times. We've been teaching at times 6 days out of the week. But we're doing it because it hadn't existed in the past, and we try to be consistent as we possibly could. And to open up the possibility for more bridges to be crossed by not only members of the community in San Fernando, Pacoima, Lake Buttes, and Somar, but people from LMU who could take whatever it is they're studying in their extension program and try to apply it there. So I'm going to spend the next few years continuing to expand opportunities there, but seeking out some of the locals here, whether they're in the extension program or whether they're in the Master Studies program. And for instance, for yoga, mindfulness, and social change, you can teach at Pacoima Beautiful, for example, or at Tia Chuchas. For philosophy, you could teach at the Art Incubator, where you can have classes. And recently, there's been a new studio, the very first studio, Well Plum, that has opened up, and we've been teaching classes there. And that place is going to soon have workshops. And Daria, who's in the next cohort, she opened up the opportunity for a new class to take place. On May 20th, we're going to have a Yoga Nidra class where all the teachers there are going to take this class for $75, and we're going to start teaching other locals Yoga Nidra exercises, which is wonderful. So we're planting our own seeds, and I'm pretty proud of what we've been doing so far. It's been chaotic at times, but we've tried to be as systematic as we could. And I'd like to take this opportunity to consider everything that we're learning, intellectually, academically, we need an avenue, we need a way where we could apply everything that we're learning. And that's one thing that I would like to do, both myself and to maybe be a conduit to other people who want to take what they're learning and actually apply it in the field while they're taking classes here. So that's about it. Thank you very much. I was so scared I would run out of time, so.
42 seconds to spare.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Systematic.
Last time I was on page 5 and it was 14 minutes.
Question? Do you want a question?
Any questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm Terry Roseman, and we've not had an opportunity to meet officially over maybe we've met briefly, but I've heard so much about you from many of your cohort members, and to hear your story and what you and your wife and your family has accomplished, it's just extraordinary, really. Congratulations to you.
Thank you. Yes.
So I know that this has grown from a tiny seed in like the center of your heart since the first day we started this program. We've been talking about doing this, and to see it happening is so amazing and inspiring. And I'm just, I mean, like, what roadblocks are you hitting? Why isn't this just exploding right away?
Time to grow.
Yeah. Well, actually, one thing I didn't mention was we did a survey, and we sent out emails to as many people as we could. We've gotten 8 responses so far to try to address some of those questions. You know, what kind of fears people might have. Is it an economic issue? And it turns out it's not necessarily an economic issue. There are other gyms. There's CrossFit. There are a lot of people who are physically active in my hometown. It's just that yoga hasn't really existed in the past. So it's not necessarily an economic issue, but a lot of people might consider that a yoga class is not worth $10, $15. I'm not sure, and that's what we're trying to explore. And a lot of it has to do with having their first experience where they're putting themselves into very unorthodox positions and having to be asked to breathe certain ways and just having something completely foreign to them. And if a yoga instructor does not execute it in a meaningful way to them, a lot of people just don't come back. We've had a lot of people who have come one time excited about it and they haven't come back. So, you know, so we Alexis and I, every time we have a class, we get together and we ask about every single student, how we approach the class, how could we do it better, you know? And we think about other areas where yoga is more established, where you have the majority of the students who have their own practice, they've tried a few styles of practices, and they go there and, you know, you may have one person who's trying yoga for the first time. So the variables are, you don't really have to, you're teaching there specifically what you're teaching, whether it's a Hatha yoga class or a yin class or so forth. But here, you're having 7 to 8 people who are trying yoga for the first time, and you're trying to meet their individual needs. So we've had that to take into consideration and trying to make their very first experience meaningful while telling them to come back because it's just their first experience. So I will continue to explore that mystery. Yeah. Hi.
Hi, my name is Sarah. Question sort of in 2 parts. I'm not sure if I'm going to ask this well, but hopefully you'll get what I'm trying to get towards.
Sure.
Part 1 is it a Catholic community? And part 2, do you think part of the resistance could be that they perceive yoga as a conflicting religion?
Yeah. that could be it. Yeah, we've had those issues raised. We talk about Patanjali, how he presents a system that's open to everybody. So we try to introduce these ideas that and make them open to anybody, no matter what religious background they have. But at the same time, we try to keep it, for the most part, secular. We try to keep it simple. But we do want to explore those questions. We do want to. I've introduced the idea of how asana is only one of several limbs, and it's just the starting point to eventually becoming more meditative and finding liberation, and where that practice stems from, and that it's okay to borrow these practices and make it meaningful to yourself. And so we try to talk about these things. We're opening up the dialogue without just taking the asana practice, but at the same time we have to play a balance. We have to talk to some of these athletes and say, yeah, come over here and exercise, because it's going to help it's going to stretch your legs if you're a runner. It's going to stretch your muscles if you're a bodybuilder. So we try to take what other people are exercising in their fields and try to convince them to practice with us, and hopefully in time. So we're just a couple of people, and now we have a studio, and we just have to be more versatile and open up the opportunities to other people, and have them come and help out. Yeah. Yes.
Do you see potentially in this community, as part of your kind of building bridges, possibly combining with a meditation practice, or organizations that are also looking to, in the same way that you're saying, yoga is like it's kind of interesting. It reminds me of the idea of with farmers markets and organic food, the idea of food deserts. It seems like yoga and maybe meditation and some of these other practices kind of are encountering the same sort of really opportunity. I'm just wondering, have you considered possibly down the road combining with meditation and meditation programs to maybe even build a stronger base?
Definitely, yeah, love to. Green Tree is actually, they're working with other food nonprofit organizations to address some of those disparities there. We personally have experienced the food disparities in San Fernando. We lived in various parts of Los Angeles, and we've noticed how there's no Whole Foods, there's no Trader Joe's, and up until just recently, there's no organic options in the supermarkets in our areas. And regarding meditation places, yeah, we definitely would. The nearest place, I believe, is in North Hollywood, the Buddhist temple, the Thai Buddhist temple. So we'd like to use some of the spaces that already exist and try to bring instructors there and open up workshops there, both at the VFW, at Point of Beautiful, at the Art Incubator. Use the places that already exist and promote these workshops. And so we're trying to use our Lucin Yoga entity and officially become a nonprofit, and to try to serve as advocates and subject matter experts while creating events in this field. But meditation, mindfulness, yes, all of that is the next step. Yeah. Yes.
Is there something specific about your community that you think would benefit from yoga practice, or is it, at the risk of sounding like someone, because I think everyone here appreciates why yoga is good for all communities, but I guess I'm wondering, was it just by virtue of you being there and weren't able to find yoga yourself that this desire to bring yoga to your community came? Or is there something larger at play that you saw a real need for it in?
Well, the mere fact that it doesn't exist, it needs to. All the benefits that you get from yoga practice and mindfulness and meditation, and the fact that it doesn't exist here, that needs to start. In order for me to, I wasn't really introduced to my first yoga class until I joined the community college. I didn't really learn about other cultures until until I joined Cleveland Humanities Magnet. And so I always had a love-hate relationship with my own hometown, wishing it could be better, but at the same time, like feeling bad about myself because all the disparities that take place there. Just the fact that it doesn't exist, it needs to. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question there, but
No, I
yeah.
think you answered it. I mean, it seems to me like hopefully what you're doing is something that can really spread from your community to other communities that are yoga deserts.
Yeah, you know, and meeting the people at Green Tree and meeting people at People's Yoga, they know that it's a very, very personal mission to start yogic practices in these areas, and there are challenges that we need to sort of address. And one of those was some of the economic challenges in San Fernando. I mentioned this several times. 90% of the commercial spaces is owned by one company, and they charge like $11 a square foot, whereas if I could open up a place maybe in Santa Monica between $2 to $4 in some areas. So somebody who's from this neighborhood has a better chance of commuting to a richer neighborhood to start a yoga space. But locally, that's the challenge that a lot of people are facing. So that's why a lot of these mom and pop places are banding together, and they're starting to create events together to cross promote one another. So that's a good thing that's happening. Yes.
I am surprised my name is not on there, but I want to contribute, so count me in, please, at least. You can work something out once a month or something. I'll be happy to come support.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes.
How do you reconcile, I know you talked about deserts, food deserts and what have you, and people's yoga is having that pushback you mentioned in your presentation. How do you reconcile bringing all these things in, because usually those are signs of gentrification in these communities.
Exactly.
That's the biggest barrier.
Yeah.
That narrative has occurred all throughout LA. And so the biggest barrier is not even cultural or religious, what have you. It's people fearful that these services are coming in and these new ways of practice and what have you are coming into these communities. They're being pushed to the periphery. So this is the last, this is actually the last bastion in LA in terms of where people can afford to live there, 3 to 4 families in a household.
Yeah.
So I know that people's yoga, even though it's grassroots, it's all the younger individuals that are supportive of that yoga facility. However, the community itself is pushing back because they associate that with gentrification along coffee houses and Whole Foods.
Yeah, they have a lot of fears on the west side, Beloit Heights area, and yeah, we've that's actually that's something that's come up in at Wild Plum. Like they ask if this is the first signs of gentrification, and we've actually been seeing that. And so one of the instructors there, she came in and she looked around. This was the first time. She was in this neighborhood. And they asked her, so what do you think of San Fernando? And the first thing she mentioned was, well, it looks like it's gentrifying in a hopeful way. And it's just an observation. So the way we're trying to approach it is to use our social media and little by little introduce concepts, and to hopefully get people to not only go out and try different yoga practices out there, but to practice at home. Yes?
Can I ask you to back up to the images that you created, a little further, that one. And if you could just identify and call out the people, because these are us.
This is Enrique Macias. Okay. This is Julia Cozat. This is Rob Zabal. This is Gabby. Okay. This is Mayuri.
Who's here?
Yeah. And this is Ali Berger. Yeah, and there are a few more, but we ran out of space. I'm so sorry. But yeah, a lot of people contributed to this, and I want to, offer that opportunity and have more people to continue to use their yoga.
And you're the photographer.
And I'm the photographer.
Yeah.
I have one last comment actually to kind of piggyback on what you said. I wonder if an emphasis on our culture, on our Latino culture. So when we are you know, instructing these classes to bring our culture in, to not have that gentrification.
Yeah. Yeah. With the Young Warriors, we want to incorporate Chris Chapel's Surya Namaskars to the Four Directions and introduce the Mahabhutas. And these students also go to sweat lodge ceremonies. So we want to have them experience the different elements in a symbolic way through asana practice. So just opening up the creativity behind our practices and talking about the symbolism behind them, and seeing the similarities between these different traditions. Well, thank you very much.